Hello and welcome to our Voices in Montessori podcast, brought to you by the Greenspring Center for Lifelong Learning. Please subscribe to our podcast so we can continue to support your important work. As Dr. Montessori said, an education capable of saving humanity is no small undertaking. We agree. So let's get to work. I'm Tamara Sheasley-Ballas, and in today's episode, we're talking about unveiling Montessori myths. My guest today is Jana Morgan Herman. Jana started her Montessori journey in 1992 and earned her Montessori early childhood certification and participated in elementary Montessori training for ages 6 to 9 and earned an MED from St. Catherine's University. She has written articles for Montessori Life, Montessori Leadership, and other publications, and is on the editorial advisory board for Montessori Life magazine. In addition, Jana has worked as a teacher educator for 5 MACD accredited teacher education organizations in the United States and Asia. Jana is currently the director of Montessori education at Endeavor Schools. So Jana, I am so excited to have you here today. I've been waiting to have you on, I feel like, for so long, so welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
We're very happy to have you. So we're going to dig right in. So Jana, you're going to talk to us about Montessori myths, right? and the things that we've heard during our trainings that everybody talks about, and yet they may not be we don't know, right? There doesn't seem to be any available documentation of these positions. So let's start out with, I know you've talked about this some and you wrote it for AMS Life, but about the 3-hour work cycle. Let's start there.
Okay, I will do that. Okay, so I have to give you a little bit of a backstory
Okay.
so that it kind of hangs together and makes a little bit more sense. I took my training, I took training a number of years, actually. I just couldn't get enough. I just wanted to go soak it all in. I took copious notes. I loved it. I started in 1992 with my training, and then I continued to go back because I loved the philosophy so much. It was like a little booster shot in the summer. Whenever I could, I would. And I took everything that I learned to heart. And let me be clear first that I love my trainers. I learned so much from them. The people who trained me changed my life, and I am so grateful. I also took every single thing that they said, as often people do, from their trainers as gospel, and not something that I would argue with in any way, shape, or form. I just wrote it down, underlined it, and committed it to memory, and that was the way that things were, and I really never questioned it. I did, and I practiced that way. I was a classroom teacher until the I guess around 2014 is when I knew I was going to be transitioning. 2014, 15, I knew I was going to be transitioning into a different role. But outside of that, I was always in the classroom and I always practiced all the things I'd learned in my training. And then this book called The 1946 London Lectures came out, and I started reading it. I loved it very much. And I came across this lecture, Lecture 10 in the 1946 London Lectures, and I was shocked. In Lecture 10, Unlocking the Intelligences, Montessori describes in that book you read that it says that, I saw, she's talking about the red rod. She's talking about which lessons you give first, which is, all of these things. They can have small differences in the way that you are trained. And so I was paying very close attention to the way that she said to hold the cubes from the top with one hand, not with one hand cradling underneath. That blew my mind. Same thing with the brown prisms. You had to hold them in the middle and set them down one hand. So you hold one hand, they'll use two if they have to, but that is the point of knowing, of really feeling those differences. That was okay. And I could handle that. I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then in the part where she talks about the red rods, it says, of a person of about 30 years of age showed me that you could carry the red rods by placing one hand on each end, period. Do not do that. And I was like, well, this is wrong. I was just like, I put the book down. I walked away. I didn't like it. And I went back and read it again. And then I realized that this was actually, if this is what Montessori said, then why am I being so resistant? And I was being so resistant because I had learned that you carry the red rods on each end. And not only had I learned that, I'd heard the rationale for why that was, so that they protect each other and they don't bump into each other and they have the length. And then when they can finally reach the whole story, like I'm sure we all had a similar story, everybody who learned that way anyway. So this was hard for me to grapple with. Now, my undergraduate degree is literature, and I was trained by Dr. Krista Zorn, who is just brilliant. I would take a number of her classes every semester, and she trained us how to be close readers. Do you know what a close reader is? Some people might not, so I'll share that a close reader is when you are looking for details within the text to tell you something about the story or the author or any number of things, but you're looking for exactly what is there and what isn't. And so when I read, so I had this special kind of connection with literature, and a semi-photographic memory, so I could remember most of the time what page numbers or what side of the page things are on and exactly what quotes are. Now, there's lots of things I can't do, but that's something that I can do. So when I had to reconcile with this about the red rods, and I also thought, like, what else is out there? What else have I just taken for granted as something that Montessori said that she didn't actually say that I've read? Because I have, and I didn't show you, but I have an entire bookcase of Montessori's books. Like I have almost every publication that you can get your hands on, including ones from India that you can't order without, you know, having, I had just had a special connection. A friend got it for me. I had never seen that. So then I started really paying attention to what I believed about Montessori, these things that were kind of ingrained, and what things could I find evidence for directly from her. And so I kind of started making a list, and a few of the things that are in that list are the top to bottom, left to right, which lends itself toward the development of reading and writing, is not anything that you can find in Montessori's text, right? It's not in there. This idea that children are, that the rugs are only for the work, not children, that's also something that came later. If you look back at the historical pictures, if you go to Montessori Facebook, which is like a page where Sid Mohandas has curated hundreds of pictures, and we post those with quotes, you can see in many of those pictures that children are sitting together working on their own work on a large rug. This idea for people of certain trainings that what practical life activities were and what that should look like, and what thematic units look like, all of that, there is really nothing about. In chapter 9 of creative development, she talks about the preliminary activities. I transcribed Lakshmi Kirpalani's lectures from the 1946 India series, which was, I did that on, I loved that because it was the same year as the 1946 London lectures. And she has basically no tray work. There are 19 lessons in practical life. 2 of those are walking the line in silence. There's flower arranging, polishing, things like that. But outside of pouring water, pouring grains, that's it. There is no preliminary work. Everything is actually caring for and maintaining the classroom. So these were all
Wait, I just want to hold on.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, right? Because we say they have to have all these preliminary lessons to actually step into this work. And
Yeah.
what you're saying is you cannot find evidence, and I'm assuming you've gone through everything you can get your hands
I've
on.
gone through everything I can get my hands on. That doesn't mean that there's not something locked away somewhere,
Sure.
but I have asked for and requested and visited the archives in Amsterdam, and there is not evidence for this that I can find. As I said, chapter 9 in creative development talks about the preliminary activities, or what she calls the preliminary activities. But what I use for our training program are the transcribed manuals that from the 1946 lectures in India. and that is not in there. So they do have like pouring, but then it moves very quickly into polishing, food prep, the frames, that kind of thing, caring for the classroom and caring for yourself as a person, and of course grace and courtesy lessons, how to get attention, how to eat. And so interesting when she talks about how to eat, just as an aside, she says, I'm going to show you what I know as a person who's from Europe. All of this will vary based on your culture, which I love that at that time in 1946, that's what she's saying. I'm showing you the way I know, but this will vary based on where you are, which I thought was great.
How far ahead of her time.
I know. Well, it's
Never knew.
really, it's interesting in a way, because while we all give lip service to that, I've been in Montessori schools all over the world. They look exactly the same. Like
Mm,
Montessori schools in Asia, in China, in Hong Kong, in Vietnam, they look almost identical.
mm.
Certain things are different, but by and large, they look the same. And they are all set up top to bottom, left to right. I have yet to go in a room, and I've been in many rooms in Asia. I've yet to go in a room where it was set up the way that people, you know, read or function there. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm saying that the American or European influence is very strong in schools all over the world. So that's something I think that we should be aware of too. But anyway, so those things stood out. And then I had a friend who had been trained in Perugia, and who had run a school of a certain kind in his hometown, in his state, for 30 years. And it was threatened that he would lose his recognition, his school recognition, because he was 15 minutes short on a work cycle. And I was like, wait a minute, work cycle? I've never read that about the 3-hour work cycle, that Montessori actually said it. And so I went down a rabbit hole there. Now, I know that many of us have seen the schedule of the day that's in the Montessori Method. And if you're listening and you don't have that book at your house, you can go to the Gutenberg library and pull up Montessori Method. And then the page number in the book is about 118 or 119. It depends on which courses people have. You'll see the schedule of the day. And the schedule of the day is very different from anything I'd ever practiced. And I'd seen the schedule of the day, but I also know that other things were dropped out of the text over time, and because she found that something either worked better or differently. And so I had always assumed that that's what had happened with the schedule of the day. However, when I went to the archives, and I started going through these manuals, I realized that the exact same schedule of the day is given in 1946. The exact, like, verbatim, exactly the same. Even the way the pages are indented, everything's the same. And I was like, well, that's weird, isn't it? Because remember, I'd always held on very tightly to this idea as well. In fact, when I became a school leader in 2015, the school that I took over did not have a 3-hour work cycle, and I reordered the day. Like, we extended the whole day. Like, everybody had to come in earlier. I had to find extra staffing because then it was too long. It was a nightmare. But I so believed in it that I restructured the school around it. And to see it written down that it was exactly the same as it was in 1912, I was verklempt. I was just clutching my pearls, so to speak, because I felt like, wow, we've missed something. And not only, if you look at that schedule, you'll see that it says 9 to 10, entrance, you prepare the school day, their conversation period, children are coming in, that kind of thing. And then, it describes false fatigue. And then from 10 to 11 are the intellectual exercises. From 11 to 11:30 is those collective exercises. 11:30 to 12, lunch. And then the entire rest of the day is various forms of outdoor activity.
Wow.
An hour of free play, an hour of directed play, an hour of manual work, and then more directed play, and caring for animals in the garden and things like that. That's very different
It's
from
very.
any school that I have been in.
Mhm.
Very different. And I think it's important that we look at that. If we say that all these things are essential, why aren't we saying what she actually said is essential? Why aren't our schools spending the entire second half of the day outside? And not only, you know, I know people say, well, Montessori changed with the time. Montessori, if you go by what she actually said lines up with all current research. There's nothing in what Montessori actually says that would be corrected, so to speak, in current research for any of her major tenets. So why aren't we doing that?
That's so fascinating that, and I want to talk about more, the areas that you see where the research lines up with what she actually told us to do after it, maybe if we have some time after we move through some of these myths. But
Sure.
that is absolutely fascinating. I did the same thing. We have restructured to have this 3-hour work cycle. We've protected it. We've made sure that there aren't interruptions so that they have this time to dig in. And in fact, I know that there has been some research that's come out of Harvard on the 3-hour work cycle specifically, and the impact on the brain around it. So it's really fascinating. So let's start with um, the schedule. How has that changed how you are approaching? You're in a school leadership role now. You have a lot of schools that you're working with. How are you responding to that information?
What I've learned over time is that I am a speedboat. And thank God I worked with a woman 1 year. Her name was Faith. And I love Faith so much. We are probably the most different people that you could ever like put together in a room in your whole life. And I love her fiercely. And we were the kind of co-teachers who ended up dressing the same way most of the week. Have you ever had that happen where you come in, you're wearing exactly like the same white capri pants and the same pink shirt, like those kinds of things. And she said to me one time, she said, Jana, you are a speedboat and I am an ocean liner. I do not move as fast as you do. And that was quite possibly the best gift that anyone has ever given me, as being able to say that. So while in the olden days, younger Jana would have been like, everyone has to change this now. That is not what older Jana, um, that's not what older, hopefully wiser Jana knows is best. And frankly, what I've always said is if what you're doing is working for you, like, great. If you have 3 hours and it works for you, that's great. Like I had 3 hours too. Like I even changed my whole schedule. I put my money where my mouth was. Like I totally get it. If it works for you, great. That's great. You're following the children that you have. If it's not working for you,
Mm.
you might feel a little relief by understanding how much value Montessori put on play, you know. And so I am not, it's not my job to, my job is to like set a course, like a far away, like chart a course that's going to happen over a period of years. It is not my desire nor inclination to, and it doesn't work, frankly, even if it were my desire to make anybody change right now on anything. That's not my role. My role is to inspire people, to encourage them to think, those kinds of things. So as far as like what it impacts on a daily in my daily life, not much.
Mm.
People who are open or interested or ask me questions, that's great. I'm down for it. I'm here for you. But then people who are interested, I'm happy to info dump about it for hours. So when we are thinking about I feel like I need to also slide in this other part that's going to be helpful because people often have these questions together. So yes, we have the schedule of the day, but the 3-hour work cycle came from the curves of activity in the advanced Montessori method, or spontaneous activity in education, which is what I call it. And I'm like, you're right. That's where those charts are. But the chart that you see most often referenced is a chart of the whole class at work, first of all, and it's the only chart with times on it, and you have to overlay that with the schedule of the day.
Okay,
So,
can you say more about that?
so
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that when Montessori lists the schedule of the day, you can see where this coincides. So she says the start of the day, 9 o'clock entrance, those kinds of things. If you look on the work curves, it also says 9 o'clock. If you can hang on a second, I will pull it up and show you. Here's the chart that people reference from spontaneous activity and education when they're talking about the 3-hour work cycle.
Okay.
And it starts at the same time as Montessori's schedule of the day, 9 o'clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
So various actions, that lines up with what she says too. 9 o'clock entrance. They come in, they have conversation, they get ready for the day. They engage in activities basically of practical life and caring for themselves and other people. They have conversation period. Then at 10 o'clock, you have false fatigue or agitation. And then from 10, 10 and a half to 11, okay, notice here, 10 to 11, that's the same in the schedule of the day. Most earnest work, new and difficult work. So this is when the adult is giving lessons, okay? Then it says also 11 and 30. So this is where you have the group time. This is where you have the group time, and you see that then the cessation of work, and this is when they move into lunch. So this is not different than that schedule. But what people have done is they've assumed that this did not include a coming together. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So if you couple this with the schedule of the day, then you can see that it was only to 11 that the work is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you have the collective exercises, which is something else that we need to talk about again. Most of the time now, when people are doing collective exercises, or I'm sorry, when people are gathering at the end of the day, they are doing group, some kind of group. And mostly that group is for adults to sit. I mean, for children to sit crisscross applesauce quietly, and for the adult to be giving them information, right? In Montessori's schedule of the day, which let me go down here. Here we go. In Montessori's schedule of the day, we have from 11 to 11:30 is not sit and get group. It is simple gymnastics, ordinary movements done gracefully, normal position of the body, walking, marching in line, salutations, movements for attention, placing of objects gracefully. It is moving together, right? Like, so this part of the day is when you're doing things independently, and this part of the day is when you're doing things interdependently. And both of those are necessary. Again, if you look at the second part of the day, you have free games from 12 to 1, directed games from 1 to 2. Well, guess what? There again, you have independence and interdependence, one after the other. They're both in balance. So it's not that children are doing whatever. Children also learn to work in relationship with other people, which is a great skill to have. Then at 3 to 4, let's see if I have it on the next page. This is what it looks like in the handwritten book. Manual work, clay modeling, design, etc. That's from 2 to 3. And then from 3 to 4.
Is that her writing?
Yes, this is the one that I base my transcriptions off of.
Okay.
So this is from 3 to 4, collective gymnastics, also songs, if possible, in the open air. Exercises to develop forethought. This is actually a colon here. You can't see it very well, but that is gardening, visiting the animals and plants, caring for things. So that's what develops forethought, is that you have to take care of the things that need your ongoing support to do well in the future. So this, the whole day is very different than what a lot of people have come to believe. A lot of people have come to believe that there must be an afternoon academic work cycle, and that if children are sleeping, then those older children need to be, doing academic work. And that is just not what the schedule was. And we really need to be advocating to go back to it, because there is all kinds of research on the importance of play. The American Academy of Pediatrics has work on this. The World Health Organization, the CDC, In addition to, it's not just play. She says a number of things, like for instance, here it says directed games, if possible, in the open air. Collective gymnastics and songs, if possible, in the open air.
I just
Being
point out,
outside.
so
I'm
hold on,
sorry.
those people who are at home and are listening only, directed games is from 1 to 2, and 3 to 4 is collective games out, and both of those are listed as out in the open air. So you're talking about big chunks of the afternoon allotted to be outside.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you can see here why I love Heather's school so much. Heather Brown, who you had on before, my grandchildren attend her school. And I love it. And the school that they attended before and the school that Heather and I both worked at before is a fabulous public school. It's on 11 acres. It's just amazing. School has direct access to outdoors. Awesome. Awesome. Also, Heather's school is just, I think, just so fantastic in the sense that they are devoted to connecting children with outdoors. We know from research that that children need to be outside. We know from research that the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 90 to 120 minutes per day of outdoor unstructured playtime. No child is leaving at 5:30 or 6 and doing that.
And I agree with you. It's one of the things that we're really taking a look at right now, because she talks about play being the work of the child all the time. There are so many quotes about that. And I've always been a little stumped by how the work cycle could be so long, and how she would say that's their play. But now I understand that she had work time. And yes, she was giving them real things to do. All of that is still true. Her materials are still amazing. And then she also meant that they were learning to play. I think one of the things that we see children need more than ever is, how do you catch a ball? How do you ride your scooter? All of those all
How
of
do you
those skills.
decide how do you decide what the rules or the games are? How do you decide what to do when somebody's not playing fair? How do you decide if it's too high to jump or not? And there are just all kinds of implications now that we know that are detrimental to children when we deny them this ability. We have captured children where they're basically sitting in bell jars all day. They're being told what to do, when to do it. They don't have any practice at autonomy. By and large, they don't have any practice in autonomy. And while I think Montessori schools offer more autonomy to children than other places, also we don't, you know? Also, lots of people make children come to group lots of times. Also, children feel bad if they can't sit quietly for 30 minutes, which by the way is not developmentally appropriate. You know, I mean, I feel like it's really time that we analyze and go back to basics and not like back to what people have, proclaimed authentic Montessori to be, which is like academically driven like nobody's beeswax. I mean, it's insane how much we expect children to do and with their day, that nobody attends in the afternoon. Like everybody's brain is mush in the afternoon. Like it's just not a real thing that would be. Why do we want older children in so many Montessori schools to do intellectual activities in the afternoon, especially intellectual activities? Why aren't we valuing play? And if we want to be authentic Montessori schools, why don't we have that time respected and built into the schedule? I will tell you that there's this other article that I would suggest that people read, and it's from the NAMTA journal titled Guided by Nature, and the article is called The House of Children. Have you read this article?
I
It
have
is
not.
it will blow your mind. It will just blow your mind. Montessori, in that she calls schools that are rectangle shaped, like classrooms that are rectangle shaped, prismatic prisons, which I think is fabulous. And she talks about how detrimental it is to the child's psyche to be caught up in these prismatic prisons. She describes in that article, the whole thing is basically describing like the perfect school, what the perfect school would look like. And the majority of the entire article is about the outdoors. Yes, the majority, it talks about what sports people might want to do, she was very partial to fruit trees and potatoes. She loved potatoes. And so she spends a great deal of time talking about potatoes, and she talks about gardening, and she talks about how outdoors you should have areas for children to race each other, for them to relax and recline and reflect, and for them to rest. And, it is just, it is such a rich article. So I feel like when you take looking at the schedule of the day with that article, it is amazing. I mean, what you could do, and I feel it in large part the school that where my by the way, the school where Heather worked, and where I worked is where my husband is a secondary teacher there, my sister is an elementary teacher there, and my oldest daughter is the infant toddler director there. So we have, I know that school well, and we are intimately connected with that school. That is a great place for children, and they are doing their best to maintain this connection and value of the outside world. I know everybody's not there, and of course Heather's school is. I know everybody's not there, but we can all make movements toward it. We can all begin to quit. I think what happens is when we are in training, so many times we are so worried about getting the lesson right. And, how, like I remember being told to hold by my beloved trainer, who I love so much, being told to hold a cotton ball so I didn't have these flyaway fingers that got in the visual field of the child so they wouldn't get in the way. So I would hold these because 3 fingers, all those things. Interestingly, that is true, that you should have 3 fingers only for anything with the knob. And if they don't hold it by 3 fingers, to redirect that. This is one of the few places where she is actually more strict than we have imagined. Um, but I think that we can begin to look at all of these things and think, okay, what can we do in this situation? How can we move this outside? And two things that come up when people talk about this, especially the 3-hour work cycles, are like, well, if we don't say 3 hours, then they're going to put pullouts in there. And I would say that that is a willful disregard of what Montessori said. And if that is the thing that makes them feel justified, then they were going to do it anyway, right? Like this is not like it's not 3 hours, so now it's going to be 2 hours plus Spanish then art. That's not the point, because that's not what the directive is, right? That it's that we need to give the day back to the child. We have about an hour in there where we're real busy, but why aren't we giving the day back to the child? And that if they don't have that afternoon work cycle, it means the adults don't do anything. Well, I think you can see from looking at that schedule that the adults are going to be real busy in the afternoon. If you're teaching children how to play collective games for an hour, and if you are showing them how to do art design and manual design and clay work for an hour, and then if you're doing more gardening and caring for animals for an hour, like your day's busy, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's so much in there. There's so many pieces, and it's so important for us to be thinking about this, especially as the research comes out over and over and over that's saying our children need to be outside. And the truth is, most of them are not all, but most of them are not going home and then spending an hour outside at home,
They're
right?
not.
They're coming home, they're having dinner, they're having a book, they maybe are watching
Maybe.
a show, I don't know, and then
Playing
they're going,
video games, watching television. I mean, if we're frank, like
yeah,
I'm just saying that's what people do. I'm not just describing that in any other way. I'm saying just factually, people are tired.
right,
They get home and they're
right.
tired. And the day has been busy. And I think, I myself struggle with this. So after I read the article that I told you about, called The House of Children from Guided by Nature, I sat on it and I was like, I wasn't in classroom full time anymore. I was the head of a school. So I went to the teachers in one of the classrooms there that I knew was always really interested in learning more. And I said, okay, check this out. Like, read this article, this Montessori article. And would you consider doing this? Like setting up the room the way she describes? She describes that the shelves, for example, are about 4 feet high. And well, actually, what she says is to build walls that come out from the corners, so it's not like a prismatic prison. And then you put the shelves, in each little area, so there would be multiple areas in the room. This makes so much sense, because then you go from a room of 30, 40 children she said, then when you sit down, if you think about it, you're below the height of a 4-year-old when you sit down or when you sit on the floor. So you're not in a room of 30, 40, 50. You're in a room, a space, an area of the room that might have 5.
Mhm.
You're much less distracted with 5. Whereas I know that I often loved shelves with no backs so I could see through them, right? Of course. But that defeats the purpose of having those smaller areas when we do that.
I
So
had no
those
idea. I had no idea that that was, I mean, we love shelves with no backs, right?
Oh, me too.
Goodness.
Me too. So what we did was for the shelves that were open, where we couldn't create a visual barrier, we put burlap on them. So it was a natural color. It was inexpensive. It was something we could do ourselves. It looked beautiful. And then, and it was pretty amazing. Like it was really amazing. And if we're following that schedule of the day, one of the things that I just started doing is I got really familiar with the research around what the APA, the World Health Organization, the CDC, the National Institute of Health, everything that they say about the importance of play. And I just started using it in my tours, in my school tours. I would say like, hey, here's what we do in the morning. We are completely devoted to the work cycle. Then we eat lunch together. Then we play until you go home. And here's why we do that. And I just would just share with them this. I had a handout of the American Academy of Pediatrics, like what they say about play. I gave them all the research about play. I talked to them about it. And then I was like, look, I want you to go see the school and be at the school where you feel comfortable. I hope that's here. But I want to let you know that what we do because research shows that it's what's best for kids. And so go think about it. And I would say 95% of the people signed up before they left the tour because they know too in their hearts that children are not playing.
Mhm.
They know that children aren't playing.
Well, they're not out on the street anymore. It's so rare that they
Yeah.
have the opportunity to go home and they go next door and knock on the door. Uh, this has been one of our big things as a family with my girls growing up is we moved into a neighborhood that we knew families were in, but we've literally gone on to doors and knocked and said, can we build a relationship here?
Yeah.
Because
The childhoods are not the same. My own children, when my children were little, we lived on 60 acres and it was kind of like it was back in a hollow and then it opened up for a little bit, had like a 5 or 6 acre field. And my children had the freedom that I had. When I was little, I played on 140 acres. Like my sister and I would just pack a little stick with no lie, with a bandana that would have a sandwich in it, and we would go and we would walk the creeks. And we spent we would go camping for weeks in the summer and sleep in the back of the truck and fish and all of that kind of stuff. And most children will never have that. And even people my children's age, they're 30, they were born in 92 and 94. They didn't have that, and I feel really grateful that my children did. So to have my grandchildren be able to have it at school, at Heather's school, is such a gift because I know they don't get it otherwise.
Mhm. Okay, so let me ask you, it sounds like this was for Children's House, right? This is all early childhood. Talk about elementary. Do you have any information
Heather talked
on?
about it a little bit. I had sent her the article that I had on that because I felt like it was just right up her alley, But David Kahn did interview Miss Lena and Mario about this very thing, and they were very clear that you know I have quotes from her where she's saying very clearly like these are the things that people are doing now that are detrimental and so they very much had it was all outdoors um and they would go and build basically like dioramas or small examples of things to show erosion, and they would go outside and look at trees and find leaves and have that experience first where they explored it with this key experience before they ever used a card. And Lena and Mario in this interview both are just basically horrified by the fact. I don't think that's too strong a statement, and I can send you the actual quotes or pull them up. But they are very unhappy with the way that the elementary school was going indoors. And then, of course, so that's elementary school. And then when you think about the farm school that starts at 12, then very obviously we see that the idea was that children should be connected to the outdoors. And you can see here where she says we would go out for walks or rambles every day. At noontime, Mario joined us and showed them leaves and flowers, and we would go fishing in the pond and bring the animals home. And Dr. Montessori made aquariums and terrariums, even for the little ones. Here's a picture that I have that shows multiple children working on a large rug together on different things. Miss Lena went to Dr. Montessori and said, "What do we do with these older children? I don't have any books to teach them." And she said, "You have the best book, the book of the world, which is the book of nature." And every day he would come to the school. We used to go together and pick moss and marsh plants and come back and make terrariums and aquariums. We used to bring samples from nature to keep them and let the children see the different ways of life. And then she talks about how they made their materials to study things. It was kind of based on the interactions with nature. And she says, it is wrong the way natural sciences are given in training now. I have to say it because of what trainings are getting and how to present classified terms to the child. But they themselves do not know that much about nature. They must go out into the natural world, or else they won't be able to show anything to the child. And that's where it begins.
Wow.
She says the orientation of the world must come first before you begin to classify. She said that the way that people are teaching nowadays, they are not exploring. Children are not discovering. And if you give the whole host a flower and tell them now what each one you have, oh, that is a colored part. It is a stem. You can hold it. Then you can give them the petiole. It's the sensorial preparation before giving the names. So it was very clear that they believed that children should be outdoors as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
And just as an aside, people are like, yes, but they have to take tests. Okay, but all research shows that when children do best when they have that ability to play, when they've had that connection with the natural world. We're not depriving them. We are actually setting the stage in many other ways for them to develop and internalize the skills that are going to help them learn.
Mhm. I think there's so much research that shows that actually giving them more and more and more in the academics actually does not have the outcome we're seeking. When you take away art, when you take away nature, when you take away music, when you take away these parts that serve our spirits, they're not going to learn better, right? I
Yeah,
completely
they're not.
see they're not,
They
right?
don't.
Then
And,
and we have to represent and represent and represent. And why are we having to represent to so many children? How are they not coming in ready? Like Dr. Montessori, when she was giving, she talks about the children just being enticed, right? So,
yeah, and she spends a great deal of time talking about too how I'm just making a statement, but children who haven't had the experience of wealth where there was no struggle, they get so used to seeing all the things that they have that it is a lot harder for wealthy children who've been given everything to have that sense of awe and wonder. And that is only because of the interactions of adults. There's no reason that a child from any socioeconomic group would not be equally enthralled by the experiences of being outdoors. you know we have disconnected them with that. Children now live in temperature controlled environments their entire lives. The cars are temperature controlled. They just are so limited, and even the temperatures that they feel. It's not uncommon. When we first started going outside a lot, children would be like, I'm so hot, I'm so hot. I'm like, go rest in the tree, go rest by the tree. Or I would say that we need to provide they can't go outside because it's too cold. Well, yeah, they can totally go outside. You just put more clothes on. Like, these are all acclimation issues. Um they're not something that would be a reason not to have children have that experience. as I think Heather said, there's no wrong weather, and a number of other people, but there's no wrong weather, only wrong clothing. And we need to get back in the habit of that. You acclimate to being outside. You think you're gonna melt, but you won't. If you're cold, you can move. Start running. You can move and get warm, and that's a fact. So this idea, it's a skewed idea.
Mhm.
And we really adults have to work more to change it, because we can. It's not that hard. And the thing is, it's free. Like, it doesn't cost anything to go outside.
Mhm.
It doesn't cost anything. It costs your time. And I think what Miss Lena said in that part was that the adults have to get behind this. If the adults can't find wonder and awe, if the adults don't invest in being able to rejoice in those experiences, then they are certainly not going to give joy to children who are having that same thing.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so this is just fascinating, and I think I could talk to you for about 6 hours. We have about 10 minutes left. What are the other myths? Are there anything else that you want to make sure that listeners are aware? We've talked about the red rods. We've talked about the work cycle. We've talked about the commitment to play, to students being outdoors. We've talked about on wonder.
Yeah, I think the thing that I would say is trust people, but verify. I think that as we see people open up more, as the Montessori world becomes less cloistered, I hope that we will start to learn even more things. And I hope that people who are holding on to documents will more freely share them. And if they have information, even if it means that we have to make some corrections, because I know for a fact that there are some things now that we all believe were written by Montessori that I know for a fact are misattributed to her. And that if we don't get in front of that and really address that and look at it head on, then people will start to question other things. One of the great things that we can do is put all of our documents online. It's one of the great things that I think AMS has done is with the archives is just the money that they have raised there. A lot of it has gone to digitizing things so scholars can look at it.
Mm.
And, people like me who are just obsessed with this kind of thing could really dive in and and be able to share more information about the best way to maintain fidelity and kind of return to the essence of what Montessori said, because what she said about trauma, what she said about play, what she said about practical life, all of that stands up. That holds up. And especially in this day and age, when the only time children might go outside is at school, the only time they're going to inhabit tech-free spaces are in our spaces. We
Mhm.
have an opportunity to lean into it, not just because Montessori said it, but because it still holds true in current research. It is best practice.
Mhm. Mhm. And just kind of circling back to something that you said, we have to be paying attention ourselves, right? I will say I've long loved the roadmap that Dr. Montessori gave us, and I've been so grateful to have clear parameters that I could march to that drum, right? And what I'm really hearing is not to go rogue, right? I can't even tell you how many schools kind of go off and do their own thing and call themselves a Montessori school, and they're not. The children are not independent. They're not respecting the child. Like these are fundamental pieces. But
Hmm.
I do think we have to make sure that we're paying attention as school leaders, as guides, and really paying attention to the children and what are the children showing us. That's what she told us over and over and over is the children will show you. And if you have children in your environment who can't wait to get outside and don't want to come back in, what are the children showing us, right? We're supposed to be following the child.
Yeah,
So
and even if they don't, though, we know, even if a child is like, no, I don't want to go outside. Okay. They also might want to eat dessert first or watch scary. I mean, there are all kinds of things that children want or don't want to do that aren't healthy. And because we know better, we can kind of, herd the cats, so to speak. And I think that even if a child is like, doesn't want to go outside, like being outside is good for you. It's research based. And maybe they just haven't had a connection with it. Fewer and fewer children have a connection with it. I think the thing that we need to do oftentimes, because we don't want to get hot and sweaty or we don't want to get dirty or we don't want to do those things, we limit children's potential because of our own deficiencies. And so, what I would suggest to people first is that you go outside and start playing, go camping. Listen, I'm too old to sleep on the ground. I do not do that anymore. But I try to go out to the woods every chance I get because it is good for you. It's good for you physically, it's good for you socially, emotionally, biologically. And it's just there's nothing about it that doesn't enhance your life. And we have to come to appreciate that and experience that. We forget it because we're constantly taking in so much information that it's good for us too. That we're all basically fancy houseplants. We all need water, we all need sunlight, we all need air, we all need nourishment from the earth. And we're not special in that way. And if we want to be the best kind of living beings that we can be, then we need to have that connection. And children won't have it without us.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, we're their advocates, right? That's our job, is to stand for the child. That's our job. So, well, anything else burning before we wrap up today?
I mean, that is the thing that I think I would encourage all of you, whatever organization that you belong to, encourage them if they have documents that are not freely shared to freely share them. If I had not stumbled upon these things, if AMS had not had them available, I would never have been able to verify that or know that because it's not anywhere else. When I went to another archive, they did not have anything. Um, they didn't have anything that available to me that was as open as what you can find at the University of Connecticut. So I encourage everybody to trust but verify. Start looking at it. Start looking at it with a new eye. Go back and look at it with a grandma eye now. You looked at it with a child's eye when you were in training. Now go back and look at it with a grandma eye.
Love that. Grandma eye. So a careful, critical eye.
A loving critical eye.
Hmm. Yeah, that was who my Grams was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jana, it's been just a pleasure to have you on today. It's really, really such a treat to get to know you a little bit more. You have so much energy and enthusiasm and really just the intellect. And I've just so enjoyed our conversation, and I know our listeners will too. Thanks so much
Thanks
for
so
being.
much. It's been great. I'm totally honored that you asked, and I just love all the episodes that I can listen to. So thank you for what you do, and I appreciate it. And I'll see you soon, I'm sure, in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And to our listeners, thank you for spending time with us today. Take a look at our website, greenspringcenter.org, to view the show notes from today's episode. Jana's bio and show notes are included on the show notes page of the website. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast and hear the latest episodes and to join in the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. The work you do is so important. I think it's the most important work there is. We are changing the world, folks, one child at a time. And thank you, thank you, thank you for your commitment to something so much bigger than any one of us. Join us next time.